The Department of Defense operates in a high stakes, complex environment where technology has to be safe, secure, and fail proof. Innovation at the DoD, it's not just about adopting new technology, it's about enabling people, changing processes, ensuring the teams out in the field have the technology to achieve their missions. On our episode today, I'll sit down with Max Pino, a DoD expert, a retired Navy officer, and CEO of a small business. I'm David Sholkovitz, and this is TechConnect. Max, welcome to TechConnect. It's great to have you on the episode.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me. Looking forward to the conversation and kind of exploring where we're going.
For sure. You've spent 27 years in the DoD and in the private sector, focused on cybersecurity and IT, and now in the business world. Why did you choose to choose a career that intersected these different areas? And could you talk a little bit about your background then?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like most, I joined the military for cause, but in most cases, for the mission. Being part of something bigger than me, coming out of small town America, and just kind of curious about everything. It was kind of nice to have that foundational structure of things that you could fall in on. My background's pretty wide as a limited duty officer type for the Navy. Been on 7 ships. I did EOD for counter ID. Took command at Naval Special Warfare in Group 2 on the East Coast, and then got into cyber when cyber became a thing. A little bit of offensive, defensive environments, and then infrastructure. So working for Warcom and kind of establishing the infrastructure for the DoD and what DISA was doing and those types of things. And then ultimately I came in the industry working for the Air Force, which was kind of interesting for me, having been in the joint environment, but kind of seeing it in a different lens as a contractor, working for Air Combat Command, standing up 16th Air Force and their cyber efforts. So that was kind of enlightening as an analyst. Went from there, got invited and tapped to work for a big company called Leidos, working defense agencies on the business front, doing business development for them, which was quite interesting. Missile defense and DISA and everybody in between on the DAFAs. And then ultimately got tapped again by a friend, asked me for an M&A scenario to buy a service disabled company with 29 years past performance. And I said, well, I'm doing it for big business. I might as well do it for myself. More importantly, I'll get a team of about 300 people. And, I miss having the team co-located on the ops side, and this gave me that opportunity to do that. More importantly, it's veteran owned and veteran operated. So, a lot of my staff are veterans, and it gives me a chance to connect with them and, like-mindedness about doing mission once again.
Wow, that's fascinating. Thank you for your service, first of all. That's what an interesting career that's kind of spanned different areas. And that's why we're excited to have you here and talk a little bit about tech in the DoD and what's going on. And it's been obviously just like a crazy time in technology over the last 10 years. So when we're looking at that, from your experience working in the DoD and in the private sector, what is it about what do you think end users need to know about how they're going to react and interact with technology in the field? And what does that really look like day to day these days?
Yeah, well, the first thing you're going to notice that there's resistance to any change. That's pretty common. The early adopters, they tend to be the innovators. There's a lot of folks that are just looking to make their lives a little bit easier. I had a friend of mine early in the military that used to say that the best techs are the lazy techs, the most innovative, the most creative, and the most resilient because they get after it and they want to provide services faster. I kind of agree with that statement to some extent, but I think that it requires some day-to-day effort to push them along because of that checklist mindset. And then you have the other side of the spectrum that is very adaptive and wants change. I kind of fit in that category of change where, I'm looking at use cases. I'm looking at, what we have, where we're going, what we could do, near peer adversaries, how are we interacting with them? What are they doing? Policy and governance and other things. And then ultimately, are they stopping the technology intentionally, slowing it for whatever role that we're having, or are they accelerating it? So it's kind of a hodgepodge out there, whether it be DoD or commercial sector. I'd say commercial sector speeding up. I think the government side has their hands tied a little bit right now. There was an AI executive order on the street that, it's kind of been rescinded somewhat, but my opinion is that if we don't instantiate in day-to-day operations, we're going to miss the bus no matter what field of operation you're working in. So it could be back office, it could be field communications, it could be anything in between. But ultimately, there has to be some type of instantiation of that both locally and enterprise-wide.
Yeah, yeah. There's so much going on in just in that technology bucket. You mentioned a couple of the things, right? Quantum computing, AI, we've got data analytics, we've got drones and hardware, software integrations, and you've got such a big organization, of course. I know it's not just technology or tools, but how do you get people to kind of change and adapt and to be open to applying these new technologies? And then how do you implement that? I mean, the DoD is such a big organization, right? What's the approach for implementation of these technologies?
Well, the first thing is the Joint Rapids acquisition process is not rapid. They've done a lot of effort to digitize that and to accelerate acquisition processes. I think that's a good step in getting there. The other thing I think that on the human front is that unfortunately we wait until disaster before we decide to take drastic measures. COVID was an example of we need to accelerate enterprise tools and our ability to be hybrid and mobile and all those things. And it took something extreme in order to make change. I've heard the same from DoD CIO leaders across the spectrum. They are waiting for the train wreck in order to make change. But I caveat that with they have some ideas of what they could do if funding existed and they could get it, in the form that they wanted in. Um, I also come from an area where, the whole rule of two exists. Two is one is none. I don't know that I agree with that, but I guess if life-threatening environments are a thing, I kind of agree that we should have redundancy and complexity to our infrastructure so that if something were to be taken out, we could resolve it quickly and have a solid, secure path in order to do and operate whatever we're doing. Um, and then lastly, there is a complacency across the government in regards to, classified versus unclassified environments. Even though we're getting to the cloud and IL5 and all that, I get all the technology, but when you're talking about classification of things, you're talking operation. When you're talking unclassified, you're generally talking logistical supply chains, global supply, blockchain, and they don't give as much effort towards that as we would like to have. We give what's needed, no more than what's at your home. But if you put the pieces together, just like the defense industrial base, you can paint a picture and create and advantage yourself to whatever it is you're trying to do. So I think that some of that needs to be heightened, as well as the I don't want to say investment, but the technology that pushes those two worlds together should be the same. It should be agnostic.
Mhm. Yeah. In the in defense, everything, the technology has to work. People's lives depend on it and safety depends on it. How do you think about building trust, resiliency, and kind of reliability into IT systems at that level in these very complex and high stakes environments?
Yeah, it's funny because the word trust is used in IT a lot. You build trust relationships within domain servers and all that. Like there's all this trust model, but I'm a big fan of Simon Sinek when he said trust is a feeling. A lot of leaders don't like feelings, but if you don't reach the human, you're never going to attain trust. And what that means is that you have to challenge a system enough for it to gain that trust. I think the same goes with technology. I think that, the way we break through the glass ceiling is by trusting certain network or certain capabilities enough to where we can evaluate it and build that trust in order to execute and use it in environments we wouldn't have normally used. And then the last part of that is again governance. There's uh, U.S. laws that prevent us from doing certain things. And they're not ethics laws. They're more like, can I use something forward in a forward operating location? Do we use it in a clandestine environment or do we use it enterprise wide? And then what does that do? What are the third order effects to a lot of those things? So it is complex, but it's still in a position to where, in order for us to build trust, we have to use it, and we can't wait 5 to 10 years to do it.
Yeah, yeah. When the I know you've talked a lot about sort of this balancing of segmentation and global integration and kind of across IT and cyber networks and kind of pivoting a little bit into cybersecurity and that side of it. How does the DoD strengthen their cybersecurity programs and technology while, keeping the complexity at a minimum for the end users and for the teams out in the field? Because, cybersecurity is on everyone's mind, of course.
Absolutely. Well, the first thing I think about an end user is an end user should never care what's happening behind the scenes. The engine is the engine. And the less issues they have, the more they can operate and do what they're doing. Obviously, that hasn't been the case in IT since the foundation of IT. And then adding cyber actually inhibits a lot of your IT stuff. Or it slows it and it makes it more complex and you have to crunch more data and there's just a lot more going on. So the answer to the quantum and AI problem is quantum and AI. We have to challenge um, the defense industrial base to crunch data faster using quantum compute. We have to use AI to make sense of it for decision making, have a trust built into that. And then more importantly, we got to make it cost effective enough to where it can be used at every level, not just on the tactical front, right? So you have operational, strategic, you have industry and commerce and general economics. There's a lot at play here in the intel factor that we should be looking at. So, so many different as a service models out there. There's a lot of governance that's kind of wishy-washy. It goes back and forth. We need some stability there. I'll keep mentioning that. And then we need to put a lot of pressure on industry as it has been the last few years to invest in these things. So if they don't feel there's a market there to make money, to be frank, I might have all the purpose and passion for mission in all the world, but if I don't have a business case that makes it lucrative, they're not going to take that Elon plunge and just donate $1 billion. So an example of that is cybersecurity maturity model, right? CMMC mandate on performance work statements and contracting is now mandatory as of November 10th. So what did industry have to do? They had to pay the money, which is great. But if you think about like in my arena, small business, it costs $150,000 minimum to get level 2 certified and up to 18 months. We've literally put another roadblock in the way of innovation because we can't get there fast enough or we don't have the investment dollars to do that. And that doesn't matter the industry. A lot of folks think that you have to be in a IT or cyber industry for that to impact you, and it's not. It's anybody with a contract is impacted by that. So, long story short is, I'm in a facilities position now. I do large scale facilities nationally, and I'm still using AI. I'm still using as much, cloud-based quantum compute as I can in order to advantage myself, bringing my IT background to that fight. And then lastly, the command and control aspect of things. If you depending on who you talk to, your command and control functions are totally different. Your dashboarding solutions, those tell 80% of the story of the data that's at your disposal. Good for the P&Ls, but in essence of human and how you're actually doing in the work performance side, it's really hard to gauge. So I'd say even for the defense industrial base, and somebody were to grade the dib on how it's doing, I think we the government would have a hard time, really understanding how well we're doing in that space, other than CPARs and things that are going to evaluate in cycles. But that's slow. That process is very slow. It's not real time. So, the catastrophic impacts I mentioned earlier about change is they're waiting for something good or bad to happen, but they don't really know what that is. And therefore, we're always going to be in this OODA loop of trying to figure it out.
Yeah, yeah. I had to kind of chuckle a little bit as you talk about CMMC and and all of the work and compliance behind the scenes, and of course Panasonic as a supplier to the government. Our teams have been going through this for quite a while. That's quite a heavy lift, but it's really important to have those safeguards in place, and for the whole ecosystem, right? Because obviously there's so many different players in that, and you make sure that everyone's compliant and on the same sheet of music. But it definitely can requires a lot of level of documentation and behind the scenes work to be compliant. Looking ahead, and we've thrown out and talked about some terms here: quantum computing, AI. How, in your perspective, how should the defense industry kind of prepare itself for these emerging, well, not even emerging, these live technologies, and then emerging technologies that are coming? I mean, what, in your opinion, in your advice, how do you prepare yourself kind of to get there? And I know part of that's the people and the culture, but also some of it's just moving quickly from a IT architecture adoption perspective. What's your kind of view on to get ready for even the next level of emerging technologies?
Well, I mean, I've been fortunate to hang out with the DARPA folks and AFRL folks and all the research institutions out there. Missile defense. Their R&D budgets 10 billion a year. Like they're massive entities that's doing R&D out there. But going back to my operational and tactical experience, the circle of change has to do with the impact of where you're war fighting. Even though we train to fight and all that, our sensors are in the forward aspect of things. So no matter where the technology lives, it's is it effective? Is it being used? Is that getting influenced into the R&D paths or R&E paths? And then how are we financing that? How are we getting it on the street? Is it 3 years, 5 years, 10 years? Looking at the whole cycle of things, it's hard to get something from the button pusher at the front end to the back end that's building the engine fast enough to make it useful sometimes. So we've forced ourselves to be off the shelf on most things, and that's good and bad because the big conversation is open source intelligence, open source coding, open source everything, and in order to make it and speed it up. But what we still find is proprietary everything. Even inside government, things are so segmented or compartmented in information that we don't share amongst the intel communities. We don't share certain things, rightfully so, but it inhibits the other missions drastically. I've seen that in industry too, that each business sector focuses on their own thing and has their own Rolodex, so to speak, and they refuse to share it because they're protecting relationships, they're protecting their mission, they're protecting a lot of different things. But all that to say that we're actually inhibiting ourselves instead of using AI against that information to build the next thing. We're very much focused on the now. I kind of got a pun on Back to the Future I'll give you, but the days of the movie Back to the Future are today. We're doing things that we thought would be a dream today.
Yeah.
So, the dreams of tomorrow have to do, unfortunately, fortunately, we watch the world stage. There are countries that are doing it faster and better than we ever could without any restrictions, with almost unlimited funding. They have resourcing constraints, but they're accelerating, and we are trying our best to follow suit. But I think we gotta find a way to do it in such a way that doesn't break our bank, but also ensures that we reduce loss of life, right?
Yeah.
And I also think the back end work, the business side of thing needs to understand, and this has always been an issue in the military, that the decisions they're making in acquisitions and production lines and all that affect the warfighters. And we say that, but when you go see the labs and you go interact with them, they're either never served in the military or they're absolutely oblivious to what these tools are going to be used for. And so in their mind, there's acceptable risks, but they don't understand the risk of the user.
Mhm.
So I think there's a nice blend of DIB out there that has that experience. But there's a large portion that doesn't, that come out of academia, that probably needs to spend some time forward somewhere to see how this technology is in use.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very important, right? The people that are behind the scenes need to be out there in the field, understanding the teams and the military operations and how it's going to be used and deployed. If you don't have that level of collaboration, then things can go, go in the wrong direction. And brought up an interesting point there on geopolitical aspects, right? Of this race to technology and making sure that we're at the top front of that, especially in today's age where there's a lot of things going on. So it's yeah, it's just a very complex and high stakes situation that we have going on here, and it's but on the other side, it's great that we have people like yourself and other service members and collaboration there to make sure that it's all look, we're keep our eyes on the ball, to say. So you work, you're also a business owner and you've led big teams. So from a people perspective, from a person perspective, the next generation of defense technologists, I mean, there's so much going on that we've kind of talked about here. What's one sort of piece of advice that you would give somebody who is looking to enter in the tech side and an IT side into the DoD or into the public sector? What's some advice that you would give them to help them be successful in this new type of career?
Well, contrary to what I told you earlier about the smart, lazy guy, IT guy, I would offer them that sometimes easy is not a good thing. I think sometimes complexities help, and sometimes there are complexities, whether we like it or not, that we have to overcome. And so I have this saying, maybe it's part of the SEAL teams, but you know, we're only good enough today. We're not good enough tomorrow, and tomorrow will bring new challenges. So we got to think forward and be there first. And so that sounds like an innovation plug, but you know, there has to be technology cultural innovation revolution every day. And if we're not excited about that, we tend to lax off because we don't have an imminent threat, and we have to put ourselves in a place where we remember that. So, like you mentioned, typewriters and calculators, right? We assume they exist; they already exist. So they're part of this generation already. They don't know what it was like to type on the old typewriter or have to do math by hand or do certain things that we were very accustomed to do when we grew up. And so, that's great. I hear academia crying about AI right now, and I'm like, guys, you got to learn to embrace it, because this is an accelerator that we can put on something to speed up. All this technology, all this way of thinking, use our critical thinking for even more complex problems. And I think that there's good to slow down and think about the legacy and how we got to where we are, but I don't think we should live there very long. I think the next generation, needs to focus on what they're doing that is new. And I laugh because I am also a doctoral student, and the whole dissertation thing, new exciting work that is going to play something to innovate to the next level. It's original. I think that it's difficult. We have a lot of technology, we have a lot of people, processes, and other things in place, and we're learning those things in order to accelerate those things. So learning takes time, but AI and things like that will accelerate that learning ability and put us in a place where we can actually have an outcome that is original, but is using different tools like the typewriter speeding us up, and the calculator in the
Mhm.
field, right?
Mhm.
So I think there's a lot we can do that. And the other last thing I would offer them is, you know, it's okay to say no on things. But we always have this kind of rhythm where, okay, well, it, if can't isn't a thing, then how can we get to can? How do we get to yes? What does it take to get there? Like, don't quit the fight before you get there, right? Exhaust what you can, bring in new ideas, new people, new technologies, see it, case study it, become a student of what it is you're dealing with. So outside academia, we don't stop learning. Matter of fact, in most cases, we'll fail a few times before we get there. And unfortunately, we don't want catastrophe like AI could be, right? That's what everybody's afraid of. But the truth is that we are going to catapult ourselves in every arena. And I'll give one specific example where I've seen it work. Elon Musk, regardless of how people feel about him, he was launching up to 70 birds into the sky in a day. I mean, no, at no point has government ever done that. At no point has industry ever done that, right? And then in the human factor, when they had a problem, he had the ability to go recover astronauts on a whim for very little cost and rescue human lives. Like that's where we see technology and innovation crossing, and bring that to any use case, any SCADA system, anything we're doing, all these robotics, our day-to-day routines that we see in automations and other things. And ultimately, all we're trying to do is improve the quality of life of humans and keep us well and safe, right? That's what we're doing.
Yeah. And speaking of improving the quality of life, and tell me a little bit about your business. I think this is really fascinating as well. You own, or you're leading as a CEO of a veteran owned small business, which I think is actually growing pretty quickly. Can you talk a little bit about that for our audience?
Yeah, absolutely. So came in on a great opportunity from a good friend of mine, and we partnered in this deal. And he's the operations boss, and I took the hat and the seat, so to speak. Um, and the complexities of the business side, even though I was in business, I didn't really understand all the nuances. The whole C-suite thing, the how do you interact with hundreds of people nationally and all these different contracts, all the badge flipping that happens out there, it's very difficult to communicate in general. It really is. And so I've spent the last, I don't know, about year now, and 2 years really, just trying to figure out how to do that effectively. And more importantly, is, I came from the upbringing in the military, growing up enlisted, how am I taking care of my people? How am I communicating with my people? How am I, what do they need from me, right? So a lot of people think that being a CEO has to do with you, it has to do with everybody else. So, what am I doing to make sure that they're a success? Because their success is our success. What is success? How is it measured? Key performance indicators. And really, at the end of the day, we focus on the mission. So my mission is the federal market space. I focus on government contracting. I'm very clear about who my customers and accounts are. And then everything we do focuses on that. So whether it be marketing, the people, veterans, so in our hiring process, in how we come about and how we interact with our customers. We do a lot of work with the FAA. We do a lot of work with Veterans Affairs. We do a lot of work at large with the global federal space, and
Mhm.
all of them ring the same, right? Every one of them appreciates veterans. Every one of them appreciates our culture of service. And for me, I'm a Christian, so my faith plays a lot into what I do, how we treat each other, how we conduct business ethically, and the information that's being shared, the relationships that are had in that environment are actually prospering, right? So I think that really builds seeds to a lot of things. And I've had at least a couple cases where I'm being asked, how do I become a corporate asset? Because they don't like badge flipping if we lose a contract or gain a contract, or the world that they've lived in for a very long time. And I'm like, I wish I could hire all you as corporate staff, but government contracting has its challenges too. Uh,
Yeah.
so again, I want them to want to be a part of this, just like I want to be a part of this.
Yeah, I love that advice, and I think your experience in in the military and the DoD, then transitioning over to the private sector and that kind of business transformation obviously plays out in your success. And I got to say, it's been fascinating having a conversation with you today. Thank you so much for joining the episode, and I wish you the absolute best moving forward. Thank you, Max, for being here today.
Thanks, David. I appreciate it. I had a great time.
This has been another great episode of TechConnect. I'm David Sholkovitz. Stay connected with us so we can stay connected with you.